3 bone-chilling true hidden camera horror stories that haunt you forever. The camera flickered to life, and in that moment, everything changed. What seemed like a harmless purchase turned into a doorway of nightmares. Viewer beware, this is no ordinary tale. The hidden cameras capture life as it unravels, revealing the terrifying truths that lurk in the shadows of the ordinary. One family thought they were merely securing their home. Instead, they uncovered something that would twist their lives into a spiral of horror. It all began in a quiet neighborhood, where houses sat like toys in an elaborate playset. The Johnsons installed their camera just outside their front door, thinking it would help protect them from petty theft. But it was more than just an extra pair of eyes. Late one night, the footage revealed a figure, a dark silhouette lurking just outside the glow of their porch light. The air thickened as the unseen figure stood motionless, absorbing the night like a predator waiting for its prey. Heartbeats raced and breath caught as they replayed the footage, desperate to understand the source of this growing dread. Days turned into weeks, and the shadow returned night after night. The Johnsons felt eyes on them, even when they shut their windows and locked their doors. Neighbors began to murmur, the baking cookies and friendly waves were replaced with quizzical glances and whispered fears. Something sinister clung to the air, thick as fog. It consumed their thoughts, gnawing at their sanity. This wasn't just a story. It was their life crumbling under the weight of fear. Then came the night of the final confrontation. The footage showed the figure creeping closer and closer to their home, until it vanished from the view of the camera. The Johnsons' hearts thundered within their chests. Could it have stepped inside? A lump formed in their throats as they held their breath, the tension wrapped around them like a vice. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The camera recorded yet another chilling moment, a voice, soft yet sinister, whispering through the stillness of the night. It called out to them, a mocking lullaby that froze the blood in their veins. Let me in. A scream echoed through their minds, merging with the unwanted words of the figure. They had to know who or what was haunting them. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they grabbed the camera and headed toward the door, each creak of the floorboards amplifying the heavy silence around them. But who was waiting on the other side? What darkness had they awakened? As they approached the door, a terrible thought loomed over them. Was this nightmare only the beginning? The doorknob felt icy, a shiver running down the Johnsons' spines as they exchanged terrified glances. They had no backup plan, no idea what lay just beyond the thin layer of wood. Each second stretched like an eternity, the weight of dread settling in their chests. Shadows danced on the walls, and their breaths mingled in the suffocating air of fear. Should we call the police? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Mark shook his head, his eyes wide. They both knew that calling for help seemed futile if they didn't even understand what they were facing. The moment stretched until it felt like being suspended in time, then Mark gritted his teeth and turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but empty space and the silent night enveloped in darkness. The porch light flickered, casting eerie patterns that felt like ghostly fingers reaching out. They stepped outside, the cool air hitting their skin like a slap. The world seemed unnaturally quiet, almost holding its breath. As they scanned their surroundings, dread pooled in their stomachs. Nothing moved. Yet they couldn't shake the gnawing sensation that they were being watched. Then, as if summoned by their fear, the air shifted with an unsettling rush. A soft rustling echoed from the nearby bushes, causing both of them to freeze. Eyes wide, they turned, hearts pounding loudly in their ears. "Hello?" Mark called out, his voice shaky. A gust of wind rustled the branches, the sound eerily mimicking a low, mocking laugh that seemed to emanate from nowhere. It felt like chill fingers tracing down their backs. They backed towards the door, instinct screaming at them to flee inside. Just then, the camera on their front porch flickered to life, illuminating their faces with a haunting glow. "What is it capturing now?" Sarah muttered, dread settling in again. As if in response, the screen displayed a new clip. This time, it was a different angle. The figure appeared on the screen, slightly clearer, yet obscured. It was no longer just a shadow. Long, spindly fingers brushed through the bushes as the figure crouched low, studying the house with a predatory intent. A face emerged, hollow eyes reflecting darkness that seemed to suck in light. Mark stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a small step. "We need to go back inside. Now." They bolted for the door, hands fumbling as they tried to get it shut. But as it clicked closed, something heavy thudded against it, jolting them with a force that echoed in the quiet night. Panic surged through their veins, and the walls felt like they were closing in. They were trapped. "Turn off the camera," Sarah shouted, heart racing. Mark scrambled for the device, but as he swiped at the screen, the footage wouldn't cease. Instead, it showed the figure standing right outside their door, head cocked to one side with a twisted grin stretching across its face, a grotesque beacon of terror. "What the hell is this?" Mark cried, backing away. But the figure began to move again. It wasn't just observing anymore. It was advancing, with horror flooding their senses. The air crackled with dread. "What do we do?" Sarah squeaked, her voice barely a whisper. Then, another sound pierced the stillness, a guttural, almost human-like growl that rattled both of them to the core. "Do you think it knows we're in here?" Mark whispered, his heart hammering in his chest. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the house, sending shockwaves through their minds. Another ingress? Had it found a way inside already? The couple stood rooted to the spot, fear coursing through them, hearts racing as they grasped for some sense of control in the spiraling nightmare. Would the figure break in, or was it toying with them? The questions raced through their minds, desperate for answers wrapped in the chaos. And then, in their frozen state, came a realization: if it was inside. "Turn the camera back on," Sarah yelled, the gravity of their situation jolting her into action. What could they capture that might save them? Unbeknownst to them, the dark figure was only just beginning its deadly game. The camera flickered ominously, bathing the cramped space in an otherworldly glow. Mark's fingers trembled as he fought to regain control over the device, but panic blurred his thoughts. The screen turned erratic, distorting images and sounds, morphing the already unsettling reality into something far more sinister. "Mark! What if it can see us?" Sarah's voice rang sharp and piercing, pulling him back from the brink of madness. He felt a surge of adrenaline washing over him. "It's just a camera, it can't see us, right?" The uncertainty lingered in the air like a fog, thick and suffocating. The rustling outside grew louder, as if a whole choir of shadows were converging upon them, driven by some dark hunger. The guttural growl resonated once more, striking like a hammer against their sanity. I need to check the back," Mark stammered, instinct overtaking his fear. There was a fracture in the dark, a chance to escape. Before he could make a move, another deafening crash exploded in the hallway, as if the home itself was pleading for their help. They exchanged terrified glances, their breath hitching in harmony. With no time to waste, they took a cautious step towards the back room. The tension in the air was electric, every little sound magnified: the creaking floorboards, the fluttering shadows, even their own pounding hearts. "Maybe it's trying to trick us. We should stick together," Sarah urged, her eyes darting like a rabbit searching for a burrow, a hint of defiance igniting in her voice. "If we can corner it somehow." As they edged closer to the back door, muted whispers gripped their thoughts. They nearly jumped when the camera captured a life of its own, cycling through clips like a slideshow of their impending doom. Each frame revealed the figure shifting, its spindly fingers now peeling away from the bushes. Each blink captured the grotesque grin widening, delighting in its own pursuit. They stumbled towards the living room, instinctively ducking behind the couch as sounds echoed from wherever the hidden terror lurked. The front door rattled violently, as if someone or something was determined to break in. "Mark!" Sarah hissed, grabbing his arm with white-knuckled fear. "The window. If we can get out, we can call for help." "Yeah," he breathed, panic surfacing again. Another crash reverberated, more relentless this time, accompanied by something that sounded like laughter, a creepy joke only the darkness could understand. They dashed toward the window, hearts racing in sync. But as they reached for the latch, they froze. There it was again, a low guttural growl, now closer than before. The window rattled in its frame. The couple exchanged a horrified glance. What were they facing? That monstrous desire to hunt. Just as Mark's fingertips brushed the latch, dark limbs slithered through the shadows, thrusting toward them like a living nightmare. "No. No. It's coming." The terror in Sarah's voice was palpable, sending a shiver through the very marrow of Mark's bones. With adrenaline surging, he hurled his weight against the window, fumbling desperately to prop it open. But then, that sickly sweet laughter echoed again, reverberating within the walls like an uninvited guest who had overstayed their welcome. Suddenly, the lights flickered, leaving them momentarily engulfed in shrouded darkness. In that heartbeat, time stretched thin, thickening the air with dread. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, laden with fear that twisted his gut. When the lights blasted back to life, the grotesque figure was right there, inches away. Its hollow eyes locked onto Mark's, each breath suddenly feeling like shards of ice threading through his soul. In that instant, every thought evaporated, and blades of terror pierced his heart. It leaned closer, its breath hot and rancid. Run, he barely managed, a primal urge surging through him before instinct kicked in. But just as they turned to flee, the front door gave way, revealing not just shadows but a multitude of them, their eyes glinting in malicious amusement. They were no longer alone. The camera captured it all, their last moments, two silhouettes ebbing away into darkness, pursued by a nightmare that thrived on fear. In the chaos of flight, time felt frozen, every beat of their hearts resonating like the distant echo of a ticking clock, counting down their final chance. Little did they know, something worse than mere terror awaited them. Were they the hunted, or was it something far more grotesque lurking within the shadows? As the camera whirred, recording every chilling second, Sarah and Mark had only one fleeting thought echoing in their minds: would they ever see the light of dawn again? Mark and Sarah stumbled backward, feeling waves of icy panic grip their chests. The grotesque figure was a smear of darkness, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted, flailing in a dance that was both grotesque and terrifying. It pulled itself deeper into the dim space, and in that same moment, they heard the cacophony of footsteps, multiple sets, approaching the room. "No. No." Sarah gasped, eyes wide, scanning for a way out as dread pooled in her stomach. They had to escape. Through the kitchen. Mark yelled, a flicker of hope igniting his words. Their feet were a blur as they sprinted toward the kitchen door, propelled by panic and desperation. But just as they reached the threshold, the house let out a shuddering groan, as if it were alive and caught in a fit of rage. "What is happening?" Sarah shrieked, clutching the doorframe. Mark pushed on, the splintering wood under his weight barely giving way as he pulled her through, his breath a ragged gasp. The kitchen was a chaotic mess, broken chairs, cracked plates littered the floor, remnants of a life that no longer felt warm. On the wall, shadows danced and twisted as the figure inched ever closer. "Where's the back door?" Mark shouted, wild-eyed, feelings of nausea and fear merging into a cocktail of despair. "Over there." She pointed, the visible shiver of her hand unraveling his focus. They bolted toward it, but behind them, the figure hissed, a sound more animal than human, sending jolts of shock racing up their spines. They flung the door open, praying for salvation. Instead, they were met with the unexpected presence of darkness. The moonlight glinted off the shivering branches outside, an inviting beacon that felt like a tease in their moment of frantic flight. Just as they stepped onto the porch, the ground shook beneath them, a thing of pure terror. Glancing back, they nearly collapsed in horror. The shadows had multiplied, a writhing mass of twisted forms coming through the kitchen, leering at them with insatiable hunger. "We need to keep moving," Mark commanded, the raw urgency in his voice grounding them, pulling them from the edge of despair. They raced down the steps and into the yard, the dew-soaked grass slapping at their ankles. But as they sprinted into the darkness, Mark made a chilling discovery: the camera. It still recorded everything. His hand instinctively grabbed for it, desperately turning it off, feeding off the fear that crackled around them. "What are you doing?" Sarah exclaimed, pulling him along. "They can see us, hear us." He shouted over the chaos, realizing the very thing that had been their lifeline was now a beacon for the nightmare lurking in the shadows. Far ahead, glimmers of streetlights flickered through the trees, promising safety yet measured against the increasing darkness surrounding them. "We can make it to the road," Mark urged, pushing his legs harder despite the increasing weight of dread clawing at their throats, but just when they thought they could escape, something cold and slimy snaked around Mark's ankle, bringing him crashing down onto the ground. "Mark!" Sarah screamed, whirling back to him. He struggled against whatever had seized him, his pulse racing. "Get to the road!" he shouted. The shadows closed in, laughter mingling with the rustle of the wind as they enveloped him in darkness. "Mark!" Her cry felt like a death knell, striking panic through him. Adrenaline surged as he fought against the grip, thrashing wildly, desperate for escape. Suddenly, the camera buzzed again, images swirling and distorting, faces of the shadows mocking him. Sarah was backing away, eyes wild and terrified as the grotesque figure lunged, and then, just as the cacophony reached a thunderous peak, the camera shut down, plunging into blackness. Silence. Mark looked up at Sarah, his eyes wide, breathless. In that deep darkness, just before drowning into the void, he realized they weren't alone anymore. A warm, sinister breath swept over him. In that heart-stopping moment, the choice crystallized. A question reverberated in the thick air around them. How far would they go to survive? As their fate hung by a thread, shadows crept ever nearer. The darkness felt alive, and had plans of its own. Mark's heart thundered in his chest. Every sound was amplified, the air was thick and pungent, filled with an oppressive weight that pressed down around them. Darkness coiled like a serpent, and in this quiet, he could feel the shadows creeping toward them, drawing ever closer. "Come on, Mark." Sarah's voice trembled, laced with panic. She tugged at him, attempting to pull him to his feet. But the slick, serpentine thing that wrapped around his ankle was relentless, dragging him back deeper into the suffocating void. "I'm trying." Mark grunted, fighting against the slimy grip. He could feel its coldness seeping through his jeans, sending icy tendrils snaking up his leg. It pulsed and twitched, and each movement sent fresh waves of terror coursing through him. In that instant, a thought struck him like lightning. What if the darkness wanted them to stay? With every ounce of strength, he jerked himself forward. This time he yanked hard, freeing his ankle from its grasp. The grotesque figure, now barely visible in the creeping shadows, let out a low growl, its elongated limbs stretching, curling in a mockery of human motion. "Run!" Mark shouted, scrambling back up. He found his footing and charged toward Sarah, who was still rooted in place, fear paralyzing her. "Sarah, please!" He reached for her, desperate to pull her along. Just as she stumbled toward him, the shadows hissed louder, as if enraged by their escape attempt. And then, from the depths, a chilling chorus joined in. The off-key laughter of the shadowy figures surrounding them reverberated through the air, twisting the very fabric of reality around them. "Mark, what do we do?" Sarah's voice quavered, glancing over her shoulder as the shadows shimmied closer. All semblance of human form evaporated in their wake. "Back to the house. We have to hide." It wasn't a plan. It felt more like a desperate plea. But it was the only thing he could think of, an instinct to retreat to the last place that had offered shelter, even if that shelter was engulfed in threatening darkness. They turned and sprinted back, the kitchen door creaking as if grimacing at their return. Slamming it shut, they leaned against it, gasping for breath. The house felt colder now, as though the walls were closing in, whispering secrets of fear. "Do you think they'll follow us inside?" Sarah breathed, eyes dilated. Maybe the walls can protect us." But even as Mark spoke, a small voice in his head screamed that the house's true nature was far more sinister than the shadows that lurked outside. Behind them, from the direction of the kitchen, a scraping noise began, slow and deliberate. It sent a violent shiver down Mark's spine, and he glanced back at the door, half expecting it to splinter apart. "What if they come in? Let's barricade ourselves," Sarah exclaimed, determination flashing in her eyes. They dashed around, grabbing anything they could find, a chair, a trash bin, any object that could obscure their fragile sense of safety. In seconds, they piled it against the door, hearts racing as each scratch and whisper from beyond grew louder. "Mark, what if we're already trapped?" Sarah's voice cracked, but they both knew the chilling truth hanging over them. A terrible fate waited at the limits of their sight. Then, just as they managed to steady their breaths, the shadows outside quieted. The oppressive atmosphere shifted. The door began to rattle. "I thought you said they'd be afraid of the house," she whispered. A ghostly chuckle echoed from the other side, low and mocking. Mark's heart dropped as he felt sweat bead on his forehead. "Maybe it's not the house they fear." A piercing shriek erupted behind them from the corner of the room, a sound not of the shadows but of a figure cloaked in darkness that pulled itself up from the ground. Its hollow eyes locked onto them, revealing the horrifying truth: they weren't just being hunted, they were now part of the unfolding horror. Sarah Mark started, but the words stuck in his throat. And then the figure lunged forward, darkness stretching out an oily hand toward them. What had they awakened? As the world seemed to collapse, it became clear that their survival instinct had driven them to a fate even worse than death. They felt the suffocating dread of choices made too late. Could they escape the darkness, or would the shadows claim them both? Mark's instinct kicked in, and he shoved Sarah aside just as the shadow lunged. The darkness collided with the door, sending a shudder through the entire house. Sarah yelped, stumbling into a corner. Mark whipped around, grabbing her wrist and pulling her away from the writhing mass that clawed at the door, desperately trying to overpower their flimsy barricade. "It's okay. I got you," he gasped, though his own confidence barely filled the words. Breathing heavily, they scrambled to a different part of the kitchen, hearts hammering violently against their ribs. The chilling laughter evolved into guttural snarls, and the scraping from the door morphed into repeated thuds that echoed like a heartbeat. They found themselves pressed against the kitchen island now. Cold stainless steel beckoned them like some frigid promise of safety. "Where do we go?" Sarah's voice shook, barely a whisper, frayed around the edges. A fleeting thought darted through Mark's mind, cutting off all light. "The basement. We can hide there." He turned to her, eyes wide with urgency. Sarah's gaze flickered with doubt as an almost childlike fear washed over her. "What if it comes down there? We can't see." A muffled bang against the door sent a shiver down Mark's spine. "Better that than out here." He grabbed her hand, and they moved, darting toward the basement door tucked away in the shadows. As they descended the worn wooden steps, darkness enveloped them, swallowing their last remnants of safety in its obsidian grasp. The air grew colder, and the sounds above began to fade, muffled by the layers of wood and fear. They paused halfway down, waiting for any sign of movement but only hearing the creaking of the staircase beneath them, an old, unsettling symphony of dread. Finally, they reached the bottom. The small basement was cramped, filled with dust and forgotten belongings, all draped in sheets. Mark glanced back up at the door, straining to hear any sounds from the unseen pursuers. "Close it. Close it," Sarah urged, her eyes wide. A sense of urgency crackled in the air. Mark swung the door closed, breathing heavily as he leaned against it, heaving as he fumbled for the latch. Just as it clicked into place, the screaming started. Not the shadows, this was something deeper, something more buried. "What is that?" Mark whispered, dread pooling in his stomach. "It sounds like people." Sarah's voice trembled as she took a hesitant step toward the shadows cast by a lone naked bulb hanging above them. The dim light barely illuminated the dark corners, casting an index of horrors they couldn't quite make out. As they edged further in, Mark felt a pulse of vibration that seemed to echo through the very walls of the basement. The air was charged, and every instinct told him something was wrong. He turned to Sarah. "We should too late." A chilling glow flickered along the far wall, revealing grotesque figures, their faces obscured in darkness but their twisted mouths wide, woven with faint whispers that turned into a cacophony of muffled screams. "Mark! What are those?" Sarah gasped, retreating closer to him, her warmth a fragile comfort against the freezing waves of dread. "I don't know." He felt the urge to escape clawing at his chest as a primal instinct ignited. But the basement door rattled violently. Something from the other side knew they were there. Suddenly, the spectral faces twisted and warped, their eyes rolling back as they began to chant. It was a language not human, guttural and ancient, vibrating through the very bone of the house. Mark's heart raced as he grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to get out." He turned back toward the stairs, but before they could even take a step, the world spun. The basement walls contorted, shadows lengthening and twisting, merging with the figures. They became one. "Mark!" Sarah screamed, her voice ripped through the air as if it were made of glass. The whispers transformed into a roaring storm, a unified scream that filled their minds, drowning out their fears, announcing the truth. They had unearthed something far beyond their understanding. They weren't just running from outer darkness. They had awakened something within themselves, and as the darkness enveloped them, they realized there was no escape. A door creaked open somewhere in the depths of the house. Could there be a chance of salvation, or was it merely another piece of the horror that awaited them? The door creaked like a wounded animal, swelling with a life of its own as it pushed slightly ajar. A sliver of dim light seeped in from the unknown, flickering like a lost hope battling the pervasive darkness. Mark exchanged a wide-eyed look with Sarah that said more than words ever could. "Should we?" She started, but her voice trembled, uncertainty choking her words. With no plan forming in his mind, and the whispers still alive in his ears, Mark took a breath that felt sharp and icy, nodding as fear propelled him forward. They stepped toward the door, closer to that strange flicker of light like moths drawn to a flame, hearts thumping in a frantic beat that felt more like a countdown. Mark gripped the doorknob with a hand that trembled. Whatever lay beyond promised both uncertainty and a faint glimmer of hope. He hesitated, thoughts racing. Was it the same malevolence they had just encountered in the basement? Or was it the way out? He had to find out, had to push through the encroaching shadows. As he swung the door fully open, the light spilled into the darkness, illuminating a narrow corridor that stretched into the unknown. The air hummed with a strange energy, almost crackling with anticipation. "Mark!" Sarah hissed, pulling back slightly. "What if it's a trap?" Before he could respond, the shadows of the basement began to stir. They rippled like water disturbed by an unseen wind, retreating momentarily back into the corners as if pushed by an external force. Mark's breath caught in his throat. "We don't have a choice." He stepped into the corridor, pulling Sarah along behind him. They moved as quietly as they could, their footsteps echoing against the wooden floorboards beneath them. The corridor felt endless, the walls closing in, the faint light glimmering brighter as they ventured further. Just as they thought the hallway might end, a door loomed ahead, heavy and dark, its edges worn as though many had tried to pass through. "Do you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mark stilled, listening hard. The distant thuds from the basement grew fainter but were replaced by another sound, soft, rhythmic, almost breathing. It ebbed and flowed, a ghostly lullaby that resonated along the corridor. They exchanged a look, each feeling the pull of that eerie noise. "This way," Mark urged, stepping toward the door. He grasped the handle but paused again, a gut feeling gripping him. "What if we open this, and then we'll figure it out?" Sarah's voice was stronger now, eyes flashing with determination. Together, with a sudden rush of courage, they pushed through the door. It swung open with a creak that seemed to echo into eternity. The room inside was expansive, a twisted mockery of normality, a lavish parlor, complete with gilded furniture and faded portraits, yet everything was steeped in shadows. Strange symbols adorned the walls, glowing dimly in vile shades of green. The air grew heavier, pressing against them as they stepped inside. And in the center of the room stood an ornate mirror, its surface swirling like the night sky, dark and inviting yet filled with hidden terrors. "Mark!" Sarah gasped, pointing at the mirror as a figure began to materialize just beyond the glass, a stretched image of something that was neither fully there nor completely absent, a flickering visage that reached out with ghostly fingers. Mark felt an icy fist wrap around his heart as he stepped closer. "What is this?" he murmured, entranced. "Don't approach it," Sarah pleaded, but it was too late. The reflection twisted again, morphing into a visage that was achingly familiar, the face of his younger self staring back, eyes wild, filled with raw terror, but as he blinked, the reflection faltered, revealing not just his face, but shadows and figures cloaked in darkness behind him, raising their arms in a sacrificial frenzy. "Turn away!" Sarah screamed, but fear had already taken hold of Mark, gripping him tighter than any physical force. The whispers from the basement surged into a frenzy, drowning out her voice, merging into a terrifying chorus that clamored for him, and then, as if realizing the awakening before it, the sinister face in the mirror grinned wide, a grotesque parody of his own face. Darkness flickered, shadows rippled once more, and all at once, the truth crashed upon him. What they had awakened wasn't just something ancient. It was a mirror, a reflection of their very souls. Just then, the walls of the room started to close in, the symbols glowing brighter, pulsating with a life of their own. Mark could feel it, the presence drawing closer, pulling them toward the mirror, toward their own fated doom. "Mark!" Sarah screamed, desperately tugging at his arm. "We need to escape." But the mirror held him fast, the darkness swirling around them, and he knew in the deepest pit of his gut this was only the beginning. Were they truly trapped in a nightmare of their own making? Or would they soon face the horror lurking within that mirror? Time was running out, and something was about to burst forth. The air grew thicker, wrapping around Mark and Sarah like a suffocating blanket. Mark's heart raced, each beat echoing in his ears as if it were a war drum signaling an approaching enemy. The mirror's surface shimmered, and for a fleeting moment, he saw more than his terrified reflection. Dark figures danced at the edges of the glass, their faces twisted in agony, mouths stretching into silent screams. "Mark, don't look. You have to look away." Sarah's voice sliced through the terror, urgent and pleading. But he felt anchored, trapped in a web spun by the malevolent force in that mirror. A curiosity, tinged with dread, held him captive. "I need to see what it wants," he countered, his voice trembling as he stepped closer. "No. This isn't you." She gripped his arm hard enough to leave marks, nails digging into his skin as if trying to pull him back. But Mark felt a shifting within him, a strange familiarity with the figures behind his own image, shadows beckoning him closer. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, frantic movements intensifying. They seemed to pulse with need, an urgency that resonated with something deep inside Mark. Each face looked distorted, yet he recognized pain and longing mirrored in their dark eyes. Without warning, the figures slipped from the glass, flooding the room with an ethereal chill that wrapped around both of them, clinging, suffocating. "Run!" Sarah shouted again, breaking through to him. It was like a cold slap to his senses. Mark finally tore his gaze away from the reflection, stumbling back to the side of the room, pulling Sarah with him. They moved to the edge of the ornate carpet, where the symbols twisted and writhed beneath their feet as if they were alive. But the darkness did not relent, malicious laughter filled the space, and the walls seemed to pulse as if they were alive, eager to swallow them whole. "We have to break the mirror," Sarah yelled over the cacophony, panic driving her voice higher. "It's holding us here." Mark glanced back, heart racing. "But it's our only way out. What if it makes things worse? Worse than being trapped in this nightmare?" She shot back, her eyes blazing with defiance. "We don't have a choice." In that moment, their surroundings shifted, shadows lengthening and the air thickening with morbid anticipation. The chuckling grew louder, wrapping around their minds like a creeping vine. Mark's fear transmuted into an unexpected conviction: they had to act. "On three, we smash it," Mark declared, his voice cutting through the fog. Sarah nodded, determination igniting her green eyes. 1, 2, 3. They rushed forward, feet pounding on the wood, fists raised high. Mark swung first, the impact reverberating through his bones, splintering pain shooting through his hand. The mirror rattled, cracks scattering like lightning across its surface. Sarah followed suit, her fist connecting with the glass, sending shards flying. A deafening roar erupted from the depths of the mirror, the sound rolling like thunder through the room. "Keep going," Mark shouted as they landed blow after blow, each punch igniting a fresh wave of light, pushing back the oppressive darkness. Each piece of the mirror shattered, and with it came a tumult of rage, the shadows writhing, screaming in what sounded like fury but felt like fear. And then, as the last piece fell away, silence enveloped them. The parlor around them dimmed, the earlier malevolence receding into the corners. But in the center of the room, where the mirror once stood, something darker stirred, a gaping void that seemed alive, shifting and pulsating with a dreadful rhythm. "Mark?" Sarah stuttered, fear creeping back into her voice. "What have we done?" Mark stepped closer to the void, a sickening curiosity pulling him forward. "I think we just broke free of one nightmare," but as the void expanded, pulling them toward its depths, his words faded into a whisper. A different presence was emerging now, something worse than shadows, something that felt like hunger. "Run!" he screamed, as dark tendrils shot out, aiming straight for them. What awaited them beyond the abyss? Could they escape this new danger, or would it claim them as its own? Time was slipping away, and the horror was just beginning. Dark tendrils lashed out from the void, cold and slick like the grip of the grave. Mark barely had time to react. He yanked Sarah's hand, the panic crashing over him like a storm. Their feet hit the ground hard, scrambling across the worn wood floor, desperately trying to put distance between them and the writhing black mass. "Go left," Sarah urged, her voice urgent, slicing through the tense silence. Mark pivoted, pulling Sarah with him, feeling the raw edges of fear cut deeper into his chest. Each moment stretched painfully, the otherworldly presence behind them thrumming with hungry anticipation. The room felt alive, each crack and creak under their feet serving as a reminder that they were inches away from being consumed. They fled into a dimly lit hallway, darkness pressing in on all sides. An eerie glow flickered ahead, a reminder of the light that had been swallowed by the void. Mark's heart hammered in his chest, the rhythm matched by the echo of their hurried footsteps. "What do we do?" Sarah gasped, her breath coming in shallow bursts. "We can't keep running forever." Mark's mind raced. "We need to find a way to banish whatever that is." He wasn't even sure how they had shattered the mirror, all he knew was that now they had opened something far worse. "There has to be something in this house." "Like what?" Sarah's eyes darted around, scanning for any sign of danger or hope. "Anything. A ritual, a spell, something." He pushed forward, determined to find a solution before they were ripped apart by unfathomable darkness. They reached the end of the hallway, an old, creaking door standing before them. Mark yanked it open, revealing a dusty attic filled with cobwebs and long-forgotten furniture. The air was thick, stale, but there was a warmth to it, a faint flicker of safety. "Help me look," he commanded, bounding inside. Boxes were strewn about, furniture was draped in dusty sheets that fluttered like ghosts in the dim light. Sarah joined him, creating haste as they ransacked the clutter. Old books, framed photographs, strange trinkets, all might hold the key to what they faced. "What about this?" Sarah held up an ancient-looking tome, its spine cracked and pages yellowed. "Perfect." Mark grabbed it, flipping through the pages. Symbols danced across the worn paper, some eerily familiar. "There has to be something here." He paused, his fingers freezing over a section that detailed protections against dark forces. "These," he whispered, the words spilling out like poison. "They're rituals, we can bind it back." But just as hope flickered, a growl rumbled from the void stretching beyond the attic door, echoing their way. The floor trembled beneath them. They had little time. Sarah's voice was tight with urgency. "Mark, hurry." Cropping up a chant, he began to read, the ancient words rolling off his tongue with a power he didn't recognize. Blood pulsed in his veins, a strange energy igniting the stagnant air around them. The dark presence outside their haven wailed, thrashing against the door, fighting against the inevitable. "Is it working?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide, uncertain. "I think so, keep it steady," Mark urged, pouring every ounce of strength into the incantation. But the howling grew louder, the shadows creeping closer with each whispered word, pulling him into the depths of fear. Suddenly, a deafening break echoed through the roof as dark tendrils burst through, claws reaching for them. "No. Sarah, hold on." But as he fought to complete the ritual, another horrifying realization struck him. What if this wasn't just darkness? What if it was something that craved souls, their souls? The air in the attic crackled with tension as the fabric between the worlds began to tear. Would they have enough strength? Would they succeed in binding back what had slipped through? Or would they become the dark whispers that haunted the old parlor forever? "Mark!" Sarah screamed, eyes wide with terror, as the claws shot closer. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a shimmering figure stepped into view, cloaked in radiant light, pushing against the dark. Who could it be? The air shimmered as time stilled, suspending their fate in that moment. Would it be salvation or doom? The figure glimmered in the darkness, an ethereal light that pushed back the shadows that clawed their way into the attic. Mark felt his heart surge with a strange mix of fear and hope. Who was this being? It felt both foreign and somehow familiar. As the blinding light engulfed the wailing darkness, the voice broke through, deep and resonant, cutting through the cacophony. "Fear not," it said, booming yet soothing, "for I am a guardian born of the light. You have awakened in darkness, but together we will bind it once more." Mark and Sarah exchanged a glance, their panic momentarily tempered by this new force. It felt like a lifeline thrown into troubled waters. Ignoring the chaos swirling around them, Mark focused on the radiant figure. "Help us!" Mark shouted, desperation lacing his voice. "We need to banish it. It's trying to take us." The Guardian's gaze fell on them both, the warmth in its light washing over their trembling bodies. Echoes of the past must be confronted. Speak the words together, fueling the light within you. Only united can you drive it back. With a nod of understanding, they joined hands, the warmth of each other's grasp igniting a flicker of strength that coursed between them. Mark clutched the ancient tome tighter, reading the incantation aloud. "By the power of the light, we command shadows to bind," they spoke in unison, their voices merging, supported by the radiant figure in front of them. Each syllable felt like a blast of pure energy, drawing strength from the light that surrounded them. With each mantra, the shadows writhed in agony, pushing against the edges of their light. The Guardian moved closer, illuminating the room brighter. "Let your will flow into the words. Let the dark know it is not welcome." As Mark finished chanting, Sarah took a deep breath, her voice trembling but resolute. "Through the light, we reclaim." With that, the shadows recoiled as though slapped. The air crackled, swirling between them, a bizarre dance of light and dark. The void behind the door pulsated, the darkness gathering like a storm. "No!" it roared, a howl that sent chills through their bones. Mark and Sarah pressed on. "We command you to return." As they spoke, the entire attic erupted in a blinding light, the golden glow enveloping everything. For a moment, it felt as if time itself held its breath, everything suspended in that brilliant luminescence. And then, with a deafening crack, the amalgam of darkness shattered, recoiling as if it had been seared by the light. The shadows screeched, dispersing into nothingness, swirling around the Guardian like lost souls. As the last remnants of darkness fled, the Guardian turned, its piercing gaze filled with genuine warmth. You have done well. You faced the dark and emerged anew. Trust in yourselves, and the light will always guide you. With a final shimmer, it dissipated into the air like mist under the morning sun. The attic felt lighter, the oppressive weight lifted. Mark looked at Sarah, their expressions a mix of disbelief and relief. Did we really do it? I think so, Sarah said, the light dancing in her eyes. We broke the cycle. And beneath that newfound clarity, they felt changed, stronger in ways they hadn't realized. The horrors they faced had illuminated parts of their souls they thought long dormant. As they descended from the attic, hand in hand, the house felt comforting, embracing them with a lingering warmth. They could still sense traces of the terror they had encountered, but now they understood it was part of them hard-won lessons etched into their hearts. Outside, dawn broke, bathing the world in a soft glow. The neighborhood felt alive, bright and pure. The shadows that once haunted them had dissolved into whispers of the past, a reminder of strength forged in despair. As they stepped out into the sunlight, Mark turned to Sarah. No more hidden cameras, right? She chuckled, the sound a balm to his frayed nerves. Agreed. Just a normal life from now on. They laughed, a shared sound of triumph, taking their first steps forward into a fresh start. The specters of the past faded further with each stride, eclipsed by the light they had embraced. Let us go home, Mark said, squeezing her hand, feeling the warmth of their bond. Together, she replied that as they walked away, the camera on the porch flickered one last time, capturing not darkness, but a memory of triumphant light. In their wake, the shadows vanished, leaving behind only echoes of fear transformed into strength. Now that the story has come to an end, there's something crucial you need to do. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next gripping real-life tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and show your love for these exclusive horror stories. Don't sit back and wait. Flood the comments with your reactions, your thoughts. What do you think will come next for Mark and Sarah? We want to hear from you. And please, share this video with at least 5 friends who you know need to see this epic conclusion. Don't let them miss out on these thrills. This is the moment to show your support and join the community your fellow horror fans love.